All right, let's jump right into this explainer. We're going to unpack a seriously fascinating framework today. We're looking at how cultures change over time, and we're going to do it by diving into a profound academic and theological paper titled Abide While the World Moves. It's basically this deep exploration of how we can possibly track massive shifts in human history when the actual words we use seem to stay exactly the same.
To kick us off, let's do a quick mental experiment. I want you to picture yourself standing right in the middle of a chaotic, unbelievably busy airport terminal. Thousands of people are just sprinting in every possible direction. Some are rushing to their gates, others are completely lost, and, a few are just wandering around looking for coffee. Now, if you try to figure out which way the crowd is moving by just running along with whichever group happens to pass you by, you're going to be totally lost. To make any sense of all that chaotic motion, you desperately need a stable reference point.
Think about it. You need that giant static departure board to measure everyone else's chaotic movement against. The author of our source paper argues that it's the exact same thing with history. We need a fixed point to understand cultural change. That departure board isn't running around the terminal. It stays exactly where it is. And precisely because it remains still, you can suddenly tell who's actually moving toward their destination and who is just walking entirely the wrong way.
The author maps out this really elegant core structure of reference, constraint, and movement. The big takeaway here? To measure a moving world, you absolutely must have an anchor. Without an anchor, concepts like forward, backward, progress, or decline, well, they don't actually mean anything at all because you literally have nothing to measure them against.
Okay, Section 1. The stable reference, the anchor, and the vine.
So the paper applies this whole framework to theology, specifically identifying Jesus Christ and the cross as that ultimate stable reference point for observing history. But here is where people almost always get tripped up. Abiding or staying anchored does not mean being frozen in time like some marble statue. It's actually a lot more like a living branch connected to a vine. A branch isn't rigid, right? It grows, it bends in the wind, it sprouts leaves, and it survives brutal storms. And it does all of that precisely because it stays attached to its source of life. The connection doesn't prevent movement. That connection is actually what makes healthy movement possible in the first place.
Moving on to Section 2. The narrow gate, rules of reality.
If a branch can move and grow, we really have to ask, what are the limits of that movement? Is every single kind of change automatically healthy? Well, the source text contrasts the broad road of unrestricted invention with the narrow gate of constrained reconstruction. It's like walking a balance beam. Sure, you can technically jump sideways, do a cartwheel, or run backward if you want to, but not every imaginable movement is going to keep you safe on the beam. The path is narrow, not because reality is just trying to be difficult, but because only a very small number of movements actually preserve the truth and get you safely to the other side.
To explain this logically, the author uses a great term, invariant. Basically, an invariant is a core relational truth that stays completely unchanged even when everything around it is transforming. So if a belief system is going to stay authentic while it translates into a new language or shifts into a completely new culture or adopts some crazy new technology, that core invariant, that defining relationship, absolutely has to survive the trip.
All right, Section 3. Reading cultural weather. What actually moves?
So if the core truth is our stable anchor, and the narrow gate sets our boundaries, what is the variable that's actually blowing around us all the time? The crucial point here is that it's the population's attitude that moves. Words like truth, freedom, or God, they might sit there looking exactly the same in our dictionaries for centuries, but the population's underlying attitudes, their collective loves, their fears, their trust and suspicion, those shift drastically. A whole society might keep using the exact same vocabulary, but their conceptual and emotional orientation toward those words can completely flip upside down.
To make this super concrete, let's talk about dogs. The author uses this highly practical analogy. Imagine two people looking at the exact same dog. One person absolutely loves dogs. They look at it and see a future best friend with floppy ears and a wagging tail. The other person? Maybe they were bitten as a kid, so they immediately see a furry criminal with sharp teeth and scary speed. Now, the dog didn't change. The definition of the word dog didn't change. The pre-existing attitude of the observer changed literally everything about how that reality was reconstructed in their head. And whole cultures do this exact same thing with massively complex ideas.
It all built in this very specific four-step sequence of cultural movement.
Step 1, our pre-existing attitude dictates Step 2, salience, meaning what details we actually notice in the first place. What we notice dictates Step 3, accessibility, which memories or associations pop up quickest in our brains. And finally, that controls Step 4, reconstruction, how we ultimately build the meaning of a word in our heads. Our attitude doesn't just wait politely for the evidence, it completely shapes the evidence we see before we even realize it's happening.
The author connects this to that really profound biblical observation: the love of many will grow cold. This shift in our collective attitude is described metaphorically as cultural weather. Just like a climate changing, a society's baseline of trust, charity, or reverence can literally cool down over time. It isn't just one person having a bad day, It's an entire population slowly, almost invisibly reorganizing its emotional atmosphere.
And history leaves physical traces of this weather everywhere. There's this fantastic quote from Michel de Certeau: "Everyday life invents itself by poaching in countless ways on the property of others." It highlights how old structures, ancient buildings, and traditional words are just constantly repurposed by new cultural movements. The architecture might be standing perfectly still, but the people moving through it, they're carrying completely different inner worlds.
It goes even further. The physical and linguistic traces we leave behind often become complete stand-ins for the original practice itself. This perfectly proves that a culture's vocabulary can remain completely intact long after the population's heart. Their actual attitude has moved on to something else entirely. They might honor the word with their lips, but their orientation is miles and miles away.
Okay, Section 4, the Jesuit spine, history in action. To prove this isn't all just some abstract theory sitting in a textbook. The author traces this incredible historical lineage of Catholic and Jesuit thinkers who actively recognized this shifting cultural weather and had to navigate that narrow gate in real time. Back in the 1200s, you have Thomas Aquinas establishing the rules of reality, saying our intellect absolutely must conform to what actually exists. Then in the 1500s, Ignatius of Loyola gives us the mechanics of discerning our interior feelings, testing if a feeling is actually leading us towards truth or away from it. By the 1600s, missionaries like Matteo Ricci are taking these exact principles into entirely new civilizations like China. It is this continuous historical effort to adapt to new cultures while keeping that core invariant absolutely rock solid.
Take Matteo Ricci's missionary work in China. It's basically the ultimate tightrope walk. He couldn't just translate words mechanically. That would never work. He had to learn the philosophy, identify existing Chinese terms that could faithfully carry his specific message, and somehow differentiate local civil practices from religious ones. He had to find the exact middle ground between being completely misunderstood on one side and accidentally replacing his entire message with a totally different local system on the other. I mean, that is the narrow gate in action right there.
Which brings us to our final section, Section 5, the wind and the mountain, finding your bearings.
So how do we actually measure our rapidly changing world without just getting totally lost in the chaos? The author beautifully reminds us of one simple fact: the wind is not the mountain. The cultural wind blowing around us, our current collective attitudes, the societal fears, the modern panics and outrages we see every day, that is not the stable mountain of reality itself. We so often mistake the violent, loud winds of culture for permanent truth, but the weather always changes. The mountain remains. Let's quickly round up the core takeaways here. The paper argues that Christ serves as the stable theological reference point. Abiding in that reference preserves connection while actually enabling really healthy growth. Truth places constraints on our path, giving us a narrow gate that keeps us from just falling right off the balance beam. And finally, by standing on that stable ground, we can accurately observe the shifting weather of population attitudes rather than just being blindly blown away by them.
I'm going to leave you with this one provocative thought to chew on today based on everything we've just unpacked. Look at the words your culture uses the most. Words like freedom, truth, justice, or love. If the vocabulary hasn't changed, which way is the collective heart actually moving? Are we anchored, or are we just staring at the traces left behind by a world that has already walked away? Take that with you today.